Hello YouTube, Framinthor here, also known as Captain Negativity, with everything that has to do with World of Warcraft. Today we want to talk about dungeons, specifically Dragonflight, how they rank amongst themselves, what we have to look forward to in Season 1 of Mythic Plus, and how bad Season 2 of Mythic Plus is going to be. Let's get right into it. First is worst, probably by far, Breckenhide Hollow. What a pain in the ass of a dungeon this is. Where do I even begin? The heavy focus on the trash mobs. There are way too many interrupts needed throughout. You cannot make big pulls. It is too easy to pull too many for the group to handle. There are too many disease cleansing, which is, by the way, one of the longer cooldowns. For Dragthyr, it is a 1 minute cooldown. You need to spec into it. The problem with this disease is a lot of times there's also a disease that spreads to allies. I believe that one is magic, so don't quote me on that. Which makes it a really annoying thing for, like, if you have melee comp, if you have a melee healer, 2 melee DPS, a tank, you're kind of screwed for this dungeon completely, because either a DPS will have to leave the group until it gets cleansed, or everyone is gonna get a shit ton of AoE damage over time on them, and the healer will not be able to handle it. A slightly annoying feature of the first boss is that one of the gnolls will teleport to the target furthest away from it, and if that target is outside of the boss area, the boss will reset. This happens almost instantly into the fight. That gnoll just teleports to the furthest away target, so if you start the fight slightly too early and not everyone is in, you're gonna have the fight reset completely, wasting a bit of your time. In my opinion, this is just a quick fix, reduce the range at which the boss can do it to like 40 yards instead of 10 miles, and this would be good. In this dungeon, all bosses are extremely easy mechanic-wise, while the trash is actually pretty much cancer. This dungeon alone will make Season 2 pretty bad. I haven't met one person who thinks this dungeon is decent. Overall score, 2 out of 10. Dumpster fire. Moving on, we have Halls of Infusion. I would say this is kind of a mixed bag. I'd say most of the dungeon is fine, with a few problematic areas. The first few packs and their infinite snares and massive AoE damage are going to be a much bigger issue than most of the other dungeons currently in Dragonflight, also requiring either a healer that can remove snares on a regular basis, or a tank that can do that, mostly ranged DPS comp, or decent AoE stun or interrupts to be able to pull multiple packs at a time. Not a big issue, but definitely something that will be extremely punishing for certain comps compared to others. The biggest issue in this dungeon overall is actually right after the second boss, the Froggy. And the problem here is the dragon packs. There is a decent chance one will get cycloned and lightning dropped under them at the same time, which is pretty much an instant death. Lightning alone, even in normal, ticks for almost half of your HP, and the cyclone makes you unable to get out of it. This combination is pretty much an instant killer and hopefully will be addressed before Season 2. The other issue here is that the lightning sometimes clips through the floor, making it hard to see the area. The last boss is also a bit problematic, with the amount of water balls that it drops that pretty much one-shot most players, even in normal. And the visual indication of these balls is not that great. Like, there's no like circle on the ground, something that really dictates it, or mostly it kind of blends in with the water surrounding the boss. And sometimes, based on their spawn points, melee will have a very hard time reaching the boss. Sometimes there's almost nowhere to stand. The boss hitbox is too small for what he is. Quick fix for this would just be increase the hitbox of the boss, so you can stand in more areas, because you have to really hug the boss to actually do damage. This whole dungeon substantially prefers ranged DPS over melee, as well as during the phase, there's a chance you would get 2 whirlpools flying your way, which I don't even know how you would dodge it without some type of immunity. Overall score, 5 out of 10, needs some fixing. Next up, we have Neltharis, and I only have one major issue with this one. The mobs just feel odd. What I mean by this is that all these big mobs deal substantially less damage and take more damage than you thought they would, probably because they're all giants and their size doesn't indicate their power well. Overall, it just feels weird. There's almost no distinction between the weak trash giants and the strong trash giants, which doesn't feel too good, and of course once you know the run it's not a big issue, it just feels bad, but it's really not that big of a deal. The gap between regular trash and elite trash packs is quite extreme, mainly talking about the bird and the 2-guy packs right before the last boss. Overall score, 6 out of 10, good design, in my opinion. Next up, we have Uldaman, Legacy of Tyr. Now, this is kind of similar to Brackenheim in the sense that like the trash packs are more annoying, but on a positive note, it's not like it's filled with fears, diseases, and also all of the trash is really spread out, so you're not likely to overpull by mistake. My main issue with this dungeon is that it heavily focuses on the trash again, while the bosses are overall underwhelming and lack mechanical depth. The third boss is very punishing. If you miss one stun on the boss, it will probably lead to a wipe in Mythic Plus. And the last boss will definitely be an issue in Tyrannical Weeks due to soft enrage with Scent Swirls basically taking up the whole area rather fast. Also, extremely melee unfriendly fight. This whole dungeon, honestly, just because of the last boss, you might as well just bring a full ranged comp and hope for the best. Because melee here are not gonna have a good time, specifically on boss number 4 and boss number 5. Overall score, 6 out of 10. Overall good. Moving on to one of my favorite dungeons by far in Dragonflight. This dungeon, it is small, it is to the point, it has multiple routes, and it gives you a way to not wait for RP. Algathar Academy is great. The trash packs are not mechanically heavy. The boss fights are rather simplistic, but still require some thinking and group coordination. If there is one thing that I think that might need a nerf, would be the tree boss. The ad that this boss spawns, the tree that heals him, puts a decent dot on the team. It cannot die next to the boss because it drops an AoE heal. It has to get down extremely fast, has to be killed extremely fast. In Tyrannical Weeks, this ad would have way too much HP, in my opinion. During the second spawn of the small trash, of the little flowers, they will instantly awake. Which means if you didn't kill the tree by that time, you would have a lot of ads to deal with, which as the tank you will need to pick up, as well as the boss. And all of this will probably be on top of the healing tree. If the healing tree dies at that time, it will heal the boss substantially because it drops a little AoE heal when it dies. All of these mechanics make it extremely hard to properly position and coordinate, and the only main issue here is that this ad, the tree that heals, just has too much HP and will be extremely hard to down before the second wave, and there will be a second healing ad spawning right after that second wave of small ads. So I feel like that is probably the only thing that this boss will have a nerf in, the HP of this trash mob, of this ad during that fight. This dungeon is the standard to what I would hope most Mythic Plus would follow. It is quick, it is not too complex, it is a pick up, you can just log in, do this dungeon in the Mythic Plus, and you are done, you are not restrained for time. Overall ranking 10 out of 10 in compared to all the other dungeons in Dragonflight. Next up we have another fantastic dungeon design, Ruby Life Pools, which apparently I didn't know before recording this, is the fastest dungeon out of the other dungeons. This dungeon took me 10 minutes in total, compared to all the other dungeons being 18 and up. Even Algethar Academy, which took me 18 minutes. This dungeon strongly requires DKs for the trash before the second boss, as there are many ranged mobs in the packs and they're all scattered around. Not much to say about this one. Overall, pretty good dungeon. It is short, it is to the point, the bosses not too complex, but punishing enough, has very good visual indications of mechanics. The last boss specifically is a pretty good design. The wind that blows away the fire on the ground, that has always the same pattern, which is basically going counterclockwise in a sense, right? It goes from west to south to east to north. That is the pattern. I don't remember where it starts. I believe it starts on the west, but could be starting on the north and then going west, south, east. So placing the fire on the ground can be strategized properly, which is great. It gives you a lot of options for the players of how to deal with the mechanics and to problem solve. Overall for this dungeon, the score 8 out of 10. It is a great dungeon. And another Season 1 fantastic dungeon design, the Azure Vault. Great dungeon with many ways to strategize your path and many available skips throughout. The trash packs here are not too punishing unless you did something really wrong, like wake up the stones, for example. While there are proper positioning required throughout the dungeon, you can't really overpull packs unless you don't notice a patrol, but all the mobs are pretty much straightforward. You know exactly where everything is. You can't make too many mistakes, and even if you do, the mobs overall are not that punishing, even if you did. There's a big advantage to groups with an ability to slow fall or survive a slightly over 80-yard drop. Mostly, honestly, you just need a healer that can survive the drop, so all the healers basically can do that, making it possible to skip a very large chunk of the dungeon and focus on the percentage you prefer getting, not dealing with the harder packs if you don't want to. The bosses are simple, but very punishing if the group messes up or doesn't do the mechanics properly, and I like it. That's in my opinion how bosses should be. They should be punishing, they shouldn't be too complex to understand, and overall the score for this dungeon, in my humble opinion, is 9 out of 10, a triple S dungeon design. And lastly, we have the Knockwood Offensive, which has by far the best traversing system in the whole dungeon systems thus far. It is using the dragon riding, meaning you can skip a lot of trash packs, you can travel from boss to boss extremely fast. It is great, but the only issue with this is you kind of want your whole group to have all the glyphs, which is not that big of an issue. It only takes like 20 to 30 minutes to get all the glyphs, so, you know, it is what it is. The trash packs in this dungeon are overall pretty much good. There's almost nothing that you really need to focus on except for AoEing them down. Sometimes there's an interrupt, like a fear, maybe like some poison arrow or something like that, but nothing overall too complex. Get out of swirlies on the ground and you're pretty much good. Not a lot of patrols, or patrols are easy to avoid. The trash packs in this dungeon are spread out enough to not overpull and allows for a substantial skip toward the end where the last boss is, making it so that percentage-wise you can gather your percentage throughout the dungeon wherever you want and have that massive skip at the end if you choose to do so. The biggest thing with the skip is it is extremely risky. If you fail the skip, it is gonna probably be a wipe, but if you succeed, you save yourself a good chunk of time. And again, leaving this option to the player base, in my opinion, is fantastic. In terms of bosses, the Drake boss, in my opinion, will be extremely challenging and tyrannical, as the ad completely ignores group and goes for the ballistas, strongly requiring ranged DPS or extremely mobile melee DPS, and this dungeon, in my opinion, because of this boss, is not recommended for Death Knights and Red Paladins specifically. Overall score for this dungeon, 8 out of 10. And there you have it. The first 4 dungeons mentioned in this video will be the Season 2 Mythic Plus dungeon, and as you can see, they are mostly the ones I consider to be of poorer design, while the last 4 are pretty much top-notch designs. From this you can see that my biggest concern is not for Season 1, since all the Mythic Plus dungeons for Season 1 are actually looking pretty good. But because of this, Season 2 will probably be pretty damn bad, at least the way that it is right now. Blizzard is trying very hard to make the first few months of Dragonflight as good as possible, which is understandable. The only issue I have with many of the dungeons is them being too long. Well, except Breckenhide Hollow, which also has extremely annoying trash. Some are really great in terms of time, like Academy and Ruby Life Pools, but some are extremely long, like Breckenhide Hollow, Knockout Offensive, and Halls of Infusion. In my opinion, Mythic Plus should be more of a pick up and play type of system, rather than being close to an hour investment of your time per run. I am glad some of the new dungeons adhere to more of a Maw of Souls gameplay and less Court of Eternal Nights design. And having a mix of both in a perfect world is great, but as far as Mythic Plus system, it really sucks to run some keys while others are just great. They just feel better to do. They just feel like they respect your time more. Either way, let me know what you think about these rankings in the comments below. Tell me why I am wrong about everything, and let's have a discussion. Hope you liked this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace!